So today we're going to be talking about diversity in design. And we couldn't have three designers with us today who are more diverse. It occurred to me that there was a time in the interior design world where lots of designers had their signature style. It was almost like acquiring a logo, a Chanel logo or a Gucci logo or something when you went to a specific designer. You bought into that designer. I think we're in a very different time now. I think individuality is really prized more than anything, and I think in a very fierce way. I think, particularly with these three designers, I think that Monique said something that I thought, she said, you know, all my clients are diverse, therefore all my projects are unique. And I think that's really what we're going to be talking about today, the importance of diversity in design and the importance of designers like this who reflect, you know, the individuality of their client, the individuality of the site. So without more ado, let me just introduce Monique here to my left. Monique Gibson only knows how to design personally, and try as you may, you won't find anything typical about her work. Each of her life-enhancing projects is site-specific and tells the story of the individual or the family that lives there. There is, however, a consistency in her work or in her approach. She always remains open to and honest with her clients. As she puts it, I surrender myself as much as possible. Like all three panelists today, Monique's work begins with the architecture. It intuitively relates to the human body and strives for a serenity and balance. That sound right?
I feel like I was just eulogized.
And next to Tim Campbell in the middle. The studio Tim Campbell founded more than a decade ago currently balances residential, commercial, hospitality and restoration work. Some of his more high-profile restorations include Richard Neutra's Singleton House. He's also known for restoring Frank Lloyd Wright's Alfred Newman residence. Tim has been sketching for as long as he can remember, and from an early age he worked alongside his father, who was a builder. In 1985, he apprenticed with the late Martin Eli Weil, a preservation architect. Tim feels designing homes for people has given him a heightened sensitivity. And after years of experience, he's found a way to strike a balance between his clients' needs and his own principles of beauty and peace. Last but not least, Pam. Pam is currently direct principal of Studio Shamshiri. Her staff of 20 interior designers, architects and graphic designers all take a holistic and multidisciplinary approach to the firm's portfolio of residential, hospitality and commercial projects. And when she was based in Manhattan, she designed films and commercials for clients including Nike, Volkswagen and Virgin Records. Some of you may know that Pam was one of the founding partners of Commune, a firm that earned a prestigious Cooper Hewitt Design Award for its body of work. She has extensive experience restoring and modifying buildings designed by legendary architects like Stanford White, Myron Hunt, and Rudolf Schindler. Like the two other panelists, Pam thinks of interior design as portraiture of an inhabitant or a brand. What we do, she says, comes out of the individual project. It has nothing to do with any particular trend. So shall we start? Do you want to dive in?
So thank you for coming. I'll tell you a little bit about how I developed my process. And it really was by accident, because I was not an interior designer. I was a dancer who liked to eat, and that wasn't a whole lot of future for me. So I took a really crap job in interior design, and when I was right out of college, it was very fortunate for me that at this firm, Elton John was a client, and we became friends, and he then helped me start my own firm a couple of years later, which was great. But this project was a home in the south of France. Elton had a very clear vision of how he wanted to see his house. What became really obvious to me was it's important to have a story. And they had a very clear story that I just followed. But it became an ongoing theme through what I do is to find the story. And if the people already know their own story, great. If they don't, then you have to be able to help them find their story. So to me, that personal story is far more important than any trend we might be told is important on the pages of a magazine. Or for another singer-songwriter, John Mellencamp, he knew his own story as well. He was very clear that I want to have a place that's secluded so I can write songs and paint. And I want it to look like a Baptist church. So, all right,
So this is new construction.
This is absolutely new construction. Yeah. And I think those arches look a little more Moorish, shoe architecture, people out there, but, you know, whatever. He's happy. It was his idea. But this is John, and he always likes to be involved when we're hanging the artwork, and he was very concerned that this wall didn't have any art for it. And it wasn't a good art wall because there's a big column right in the way. So kind of half-heartedly, just trying to get him out of my way so I could hang the artwork properly, I said, just paint something on it. And he did, and he painted a poem that became a song. So, you know, we could debate whether this is good design or not good design. But to me, it's very good design because it's his expression. It's his design. And it's his story. Just what I'll say on the subject is what we're kind of reiterating is, I think it's far more interesting to tell your story, whether it's, you know, on point with the trend, or I just think it's your story is more interesting. And for your clients, if you can tell their story or help them discover their own story, I think you've succeeded. It doesn't have to be on the pages of a magazine. In fact, if it just is authentic to them, then I think it's good design.
Thank you. Thank you. Great. Good.
Everybody, thank you for coming. That's a lot to follow. You're so good. I kind of wish you had gone last.
She did.
So we had a conversation before we started, and we were all talking about trend and sort of this aversion to trend, and I think how we all work. And I, too, am not conventionally trained, and so I've always seen myself as an outsider in this business and have always kind of had to work extra hard, I thought, to compensate. And so I kind of had to find my own way as well. And I think oftentimes I use story in a couple different ways. This was a project that we did in Manhattan for a real estate developer at the printing house. The market was coming out of a recession, and Miles Horn had done this project. The market had not heated up yet, and he thought, I want to find a way to get an edge in the marketplace. And so he brought in a lot of designers and architects to do these model units. And so in this case, we had to create a story because we didn't really have a client. And it's something that I often do is I sometimes, if the client's not super interesting, I have to make up a story for them. But in this case, this was an apartment in the West Village, and so I thought my muse is a woman in her 40s who's been an art collector and a model. I always like using art in interiors. Art for me is incredibly important. And so we collaborated with a couple of artists in New York and then made furniture and worked with vendors that I like. So I've had the incredible blessing to work on some phenomenal houses in my life. One of the first projects I did was the Colony Palms Hotel. And I'll tell you a story about that that's actually very funny. It's a complete lie, but it worked. It got the project approved. We were going through the design review process with the historical panel in Palm Springs. And we had this Colony Palms Hotel, which was an amazing property, but it was completely derelict. And so I had to make this presentation to a panel of, I think, like 30 gay guys and like 3 Jewish women. And so I thought, if I can't nail it, like I shouldn't be doing this job. And they were opposed to a lot of the work that we wanted to do, but we had to make them fall in love with the project. And so I explained the whole story with the hotel, which had a very, very good storied past. And I said, one of the things that we uncovered was that there was a really, really famous singer who had an affair with another really famous singer at this hotel. And it's 2 people that you would never, ever see together. And I can't tell you who they are. Long story short, they were dying to know who it was. And I said, well, it was Bing Crosby and Peggy Lee. And everybody was shocked. They're like, my God, we had no idea that they slept together. And I didn't know either. And they were like, is it true? And I said, no, but imagine if it was. We don't know that it wasn't, right? And this is another little fun story. I guess I use story a lot. This is my apartment in New York, in a very anonymous red brick building right by the Williamsburg Bridge. And so my story for this apartment was about the art, because I collect political and social art. A lot of the art that was created in the 1970s in New York is really dear to my heart, a lot of the photography work. And so for this apartment, I thought I have to seem a lot more interesting than I am. So what I'm going to design an apartment for Quentin Crisp. And so the story really became about the art and bringing back art that was created on the Lower East Side of Manhattan in the 1970s by men who weren't so fortunate to live, and then making the apartment really about that story. It's like, this is how Quentin would have lived if he could have afforded to live there, and he in fact lives in our neighborhood. Lived in our neighborhood, just not too far from this apartment. Okay, and now we're on to Pamela.
Thank you.
Hello. Okay, so Maybe I'll start with talking about our process at the studio, which we also had at Commune. And yes, we always come up with our narratives. And to your point, sometimes we share them with our clients, and sometimes we don't, depending on the narrative. But for us, it's a great source of fun and keeps us on track. You know, sometimes on hotel projects, you're on a project for 3-4 years, and it's really a great way to you'll have 900 people working on it, and it's a great way to keep everyone on the same freeway. I would say we always start with research. I always encourage everyone to go to archives, go to libraries, and bring in books. But I don't want them to show me things from Pinterest because I could do that. So I encourage everyone at the studio to spend time at the libraries, at the archives, and really look up the history. You know, for this house, we went to the archives in Santa Barbara. We had photography, we had the drawing set. Schindler had notes in the walls. When we uncovered everything, you know, it was almost like archaeology where, you know, his geometry and the way he worked things out was on the walls. Now, he was his own art, you know, contractor, so nothing matched. You know, the drawing to the photograph to what was built never exactly matched. The house was built for a doctor, and his wife was a pianist. So in the corner where the statue is, there used to be a piano there. He built this house after the Anasazi cave dwellings. He visited that, and so it's really a spatial cave, like more solid at the back, and you view nature from that big window. And he planted all the trees off the fireplace point. And, you know, we went with this furniture we found in Florida, a Michael Wilson table and a Moroccan rug. I love eclectic. I think with the architecture, we always try to honor it and bring it to its best place as if it's always been there and is untouched. But then with the furniture, we want it to look like it's been collected over time and collected over time by our clients. So this reflects our clients here. So we're doing this restoration. We had to take the second story off because there's some 2-story spaces, and it's an extensive project of restoring it, at least in volume, and, you know, all the details back to what Buff and Hensman were doing at that time. My client goes to Jelena for dinner in Venice and is like, there's this reclaimed wood and it's barn wood and I love it and we have to do it. And I was like, I love it there. I've been there. I know what you're talking about. It's great. But that is not what Buff and Hensman would do. So it would be stucco and it would be white and it would be this. So we had this ongoing conversation, and at the same time we were opening up the house to the indoor-outdoor flow, and he really wanted it to feel like a pavilion but be very warm. So after 4 weeks of back and forth and lots of discussion, I said, okay, you can have the barnwood, but you're going to regret this. On the note of feeding into a trend, this ended up being the most published. It was in AD, the first issue of AD, when Margaret Russell took over, and then it ended up being the most published house for us. So we did feed into a trend. It hit at the right time, and so, you know, in some ways it worked out. In other ways, I can't look at it anymore. So that's on that note. And that's it.
Thank you. Pam, you touched on magazines just now. Do we think that shelter magazines are dictating trends, leading trends, reporting on trends? What do we think about that?
I haven't been looking at it. I look at them and I'm aware of what's being published, but then I put it away because that is not related to the house or the location or the clients necessarily. I mean, it's fantastic when you find an article out at that moment and it is related, but that's so rare. You know, I love when the designers at the office bring in a painting or a piece of clothing, or they just even go beyond the immediate medium.
You're very influenced by fashion, aren't you?
I like fashion. I mean, obviously I like fashion. Fashion moves so incredibly quickly. And fashion for me is a forecast of what's going on in society. And so fashion trends, color story, and because fashion designers have to create 3 or 5 or 6 or 7 collections a year, they're moving at such a pace that they're usually ahead, especially with color.
Right. And color is an interesting thing too, though, in the sense that there are all these predictions for colors, and that has a place and it's important. But it always perplexes me when a woman will come into our office and show some piece of, a magazine with a color story for her bedroom that she would look like crap in if she wore it on her clothes. And the truth is I don't want to be in my bedroom, unless I'm surrounded in some color that makes me look good. I mean, my bedroom's dark because it's slimming, But the truth is like, I think that trends are trends, and that's important, but I want to see colors that excite me in parts of my home that I want to be excited in, but I want to see colors that soothe me. I mean, we know science tells us that. It can raise your blood pressure or lower it. So there again, clients can bring in pictures or whatever, but I talk to them about what is it that you want to feel in this room, and what makes you feel that. And a lot of people just sort of may know that on an unconscious level, but they don't talk about it so easily. They don't know how to grab it. It's not just in the forefront of their mind. But if you talk to them about it, I think they can tell you what moves them, and I think that's important. More than a trend is important. I think it's important to how a person reacts to something.
That seems like a good place to end here. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you to our panelists.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.